Welcome to Hindsight the Podcast, where bold stories and honest reflections meet real growth. I'm Lee Jones, your host, and every week I sit down with incredible people who turn life's turning points into powerful transformations. And if you're navigating change or chasing purpose, then you're in the right place. Before we even get started, I just want to ask a few questions. So think about it really quick, give brief, quick answers, and then you'll see what I mean. All right, not that one. What are you doing today that your future you will thank you for?
Well, I really feel like I'm at this point in time in my life, I've decided to dedicate myself to getting on stages and speaking about the divisiveness and polarization that's going on these days, and in ways to overcome it. That's not only just for the future me; it's for my son. It's for his future.
Absolutely. Okay, I like that one because we definitely need people standing up and yeah, just I don't know where we got so lost.
There's so many contributing factors, in my opinion, but it all boils down to how we treat each other.
All right, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your yester you?
All right, don't drink. I like it. I'm 7 years sober from recovering alcoholism. I would definitely tell myself not to pick up the bottle.
But congrats!
But that's an odd one. That's an odd one though, because I really like where I am in life right now, if I changed something, then would I be here now? Kind of thing, and I don't know.
This is all hindsight, and from your journey, from your track, you had to learn a few things to get to where you are now, right? So I get it. It's just looking back, and it took 7 years. Well, you're 7 years sober now. I'm not sure how long you were drinking before that.
Almost 2 decades.
Okay, we'll leave that alone. Almost how many?
Almost 2 decades.
What? 2?
Almost about 18 years.
Okay, got you. All right, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then last question. Sum up your idea of success in one word, if you can, and then why did you choose that word?
Success in one word. Content. That means having all of my needs and some of my wants satisfied.
Yeah, I like it. All right, I appreciate you. Let's get rid of those, and let's go ahead. Let's get to it.
When you look back in hindsight, everything is 20/20. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, it's so much clearer now.
Hey, have you ever felt stuck, unable to move forward because you're caught between what feels like endless choices? Today's guest, James Marlin, understands the struggle firsthand. From a small town in Tennessee to the streets of New York City, James has lived a life shaped by both decisions and choices, some that led to struggle and others that led to transformation. We talked just a little bit about that. As an investigator, journalist, and public speaker, he challenges us to embrace deliberate action rather than passively letting life unfold. And in this episode, we'll explore the difference between choices and decisions and how making intentional decisions can change the trajectory of your life. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you here as well. We know you're calling in from Tennessee, so no need to ask that question.
New York City these days.
I mean New York. New York. Yeah. The streets of New York.
There you go. Yeah, you may hear some sirens at one point in time, but
I know that's right. Hey, I also heard that, and I don't want to date. It doesn't matter. That there is the potential that the Statue of Liberty may be going back to its origin. So anyway. Yeah, we'll all sit on that one right now, and to see why it is important for people like you to get up on stage and talk about what's going on. All right, so many people use the words decision and choices interchangeably. How do you define the difference?
I think there is a huge difference, and I'm glad you asked that. That, to me, in my personal experience, decisions take place in your mind. They are, and then the root word comes from, in the Latin explanation, to decide is to cut off. That is like, I decide this and I cut off all the rest. This is where I'm going. But choices are what actually takes place in real life when the rubber meets the road, in my opinion. So, like, you can look at it, another way to look at it is maybe the decision is the sail, but choices are the wind. And without the right choices, that decision is useless.
Yeah.
So it's more like, so if I decide to quit smoking cigarettes, well, I have a choice every day to buy a pack of cigarettes. I have a choice every day to ask someone to bum a cigarette. So if I've decided to not smoke, then I have to choose. There's so many daily choices in real life that have to be made that will either back up that decision or cancel it out. So it's very good to notice the difference. So when I make a decision, that takes place here. You know, I decide I'm going to be a better person. Well, what choices do I need to make to fulfill that decision? And what choices can I make that will just completely terminate that decision? So it's more like, you know, if you want better choices too, you have to make better decisions. You have to put yourself in the position to have the right choices in front of you.
Yeah. I like that one, I like that one. That one resonates. That one really resonates. All right. So looking back on your own life, can you share a moment when you realized the power of making deliberate decisions rather than simply reacting to a situation?
Okay. Well, there's several. At one point in time, I had a couple of restaurants I started. And the second one being in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I remember I'd been doing it for a number of years, and my whole decision was that this is what we're going to do for the rest of our lives. My wife, my son, like, you know, we're in this restaurant business. And then I realized a realization came over me that I was like, the only way for this to like really succeed and you know, and benefit us is if we get busier. I was working 24 hours. We lived above it. It was a smokehouse, so I'm smoking pork butts and smoking briskets overnight. You know, I'm constantly.
Oh, that sounds so good, though.
Hey, it was delicious. It was delicious, I promise. But like, I'm constantly working. Like, it was always working. Never got away. And I was like, the only way this can benefit us better is if it just gets busier. So right then, whether I, you know, consciously was aware of it or not, the decision was made that I'm getting out of here. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So that decision changed my life. You know, now I'm an investigator in New York City, far cry from a restaurant owner in Bowling Green, Kentucky. You know, but that decision allowed me to make different choices where those choices were not available to me when I was stuck in the decision of this is the restaurant, this is my life. I had choices that followed that decision. Whereas when I made the decision to get out, so many more choices and so many different directions. That was a big one. And deciding, as far as my battle with alcoholism, making the decision to admit that I had no control over it. That was the one that opened up choices for me to be able to overcome it. Whereas those choices were cut off from me as long as I was still thinking I had it. You know, still thinking I got this. I can quit whenever I want to. I was convincing myself that. And then when I sat down, I remember exactly where I was when I came to that realization. But I was like, admitting that I had no control allowed me to decide to get help. So those are some
all right. So I'm gonna follow up on that one, and you can answer it if you don't have to answer it. You remember exactly where you were when you made that decision.
Absolutely.
And you said you knew that you didn't have any control. So like, what? You don't have to get too specific, but were you drunk at the time?
Absolutely.
Or
I was drunk constantly. But I have no problem talking about it. It's something I think that needs to be talked about, in my opinion, because I think, in my opinion, I think we're all addicted to a lot of things. Addiction runs a lot deeper than just drugs and alcohol. You know, our phones, the media, the way the world is shaped is full of addiction. But Yeah, I was. There had been several conversations. My wife even staged an intervention with my parents and such,
Mm,
and I'd still
nice.
convinced myself that I had it. I was like, these people
Yeah.
don't know what I talk about. I used to say this really smart ass phrase: "You speak of my drinking, but know not of my thirst." I thought that was a
Mm.
really cute way to allow me to keep drinking. Uh, but yeah, I was actually driving. I mean, this is awful, and I'll
Yeah.
totally admit it. I was driving. I was on the
Okay.
interstate, uh, driving home from Bowling Green, Kentucky, to somewhere else, and I was feeling underneath my seat while I was driving for different empty pint bottles of vodka. I was grabbing one, that one's empty. Grabbing one, that one's empty. While I'm going down the interstate, that one had a little bit. So then I swerved a little bit. I was like, oh no, I need to pull over so that I can drink it. I need to pull over on the side of the interstate so that I can drink this alcohol. And right then, I realized I couldn't not drink it. I was so deep in it. Like, even though I didn't want this and I knew that it was awful for me, I couldn't
Yeah.
not do it. I had to.
Yeah.
Like, I needed it. And that's when it hit me. Like, I cannot control this. Like,
Right.
no matter what. I mean, I thought I could. I really thought, but here I am doing this. I
Mm.
started crying, still drinking it. Still had to drink it.
Mhm.
Sat there on the side of the interstate. It was probably like 9 or 10 in the evening. It was dark. And the first person I called was my dad, because he had told me multiple times, that I needed to stop and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I called him and I just said, hey, I don't have any control over this anymore, and I need help, and I'm sorry, and I love you. And
Yeah.
that's what started it. That's what started the.
Yeah. That's you know what? That's good. The good part of this whole story is you had a lot of you mentioned your wife and you mentioned your dad. You had people who were in your corner,
Yeah,
right?
and
Who were
stayed there.
supporting you and stayed there.
Stayed there.
Absolutely. So I know that absolutely helped you. Knowing you were in a crappy spot at that point, at a pretty low, and then call your father and he definitely was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's get you together. How long did it take you to really, like, I know that probably wasn't your last drink, but how long did it take you to
But within
kind
a
of
couple
wean
of
off of
weeks,
it?
within a couple of weeks, I was in rehab.
Okay.
And then so, hey, actually coming up April 18th was
Oh, okay.
the day. April 18th, 2018 was the day I went into rehab, and that was the last drink I had. I sure ain't
Oh,
tried up
beautiful.
until then, even though I knew I was doing. I mean, I tell you what though, the next day is when I got online and started trying to find rehab facilities. And I was like, this is it. Like, I really
Yeah.
cannot control it. And I mean, it had been years of trying to quit up until then.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
my dad during that intervention, he said it to me. It didn't hit me then. It did hit me when I started getting into rehab and I started clearing the fog and getting drying out a little bit. But he told me, he said, you can be a husband and a father, or you can be a drunk. He said, you can be a business owner, or you can be a drunk. And then he looked at me and said, you can be my son, or you can be a drunk. And that's when I realized I couldn't be both.
Yeah.
That's when I realized that there's two versions of me that exist, and they can't exist at the same time. I have to pick one.
Yeah.
Either I'm going to be this or I'm going to be that. That was the decision. I want to be this. So I decided that. I decided I wanted to be a good husband and a father. I decided that I wanted to be a good son. And that allowed, like I said, it opened up so many different choices that allowed me to back that decision up. It was life-changing, honestly. Yeah.
I like it. Now, this one is you probably just answered this, but maybe not, because maybe some other things. But what was the hardest decision that you've ever had to make, and how did it shape your life moving forward?
Hardest decision I ever had to make.
Yeah. There you go.
Right? I mean, it would probably be one of those two because of, and this is in hindsight, because of how vastly it changed my life. It would definitely be the realizing I did not have control over my addiction. and admitting that, deciding to admit that. Because the longer I decided that wasn't true, I was allowing myself to continue down that path. Once I decided to admit it and embrace it and say, I don't have any control over this whatsoever. This is beyond me. That decision, it led me to get out of the restaurant business, which happened later. It happened about a year later, a year of doing it sober and actually paying attention. I was like, man, we just can't do this anymore. Like, this is just not the life I want to live, But that decision, I would say, I mean, it saved my life. I'm 6'2". I weigh 190 right now, and I'm not super slim, but I mean, I weighed 125. I was, I mean, I was down that hole. So making that decision literally saved my life, saved my marriage. I wasn't able to save the business, but thank God that's a blessing in disguise.
Hey, I appreciate you doing it. And you know what else? As I'm listening to you tell these stories, and when your life, talked about your life, I'm looking at how you broke down decision and choices. So you decided to do this, but every day you still get up and you have to make the right choices to support that decision that you make. And that's an important part of the equation, because I decide to do things plenty of times, and then I have the choice to make it, and I don't always support that decision in my head, right? And I think now, just sitting back and pondering it, I probably will look at things a little more critically, and you know what I'm saying, a little more specifically, looking at, all right, what is it that you are deciding to do? I'm deciding to write a book. I know I need to. Now, as a choice, do I want to sit down and write, or do I want to watch Netflix?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So, just silly things like that, right? But there are things that over time really can make an impactful difference, or no difference at all, right? Or no
cancel
impact
out
at
the
all.
decision you're trying to make.
Yeah,
and that
like
reminds me of a great quote that I say a lot. Is Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can bet they were laying bricks every day.
Yeah,
those bricks are the choices.
Yeah,
you decide to build Rome. You decide to write a book. You decide to start a business. You start laying bricks with all those choices. So your choices are either building those bricks or they're taking them down.
Yeah. That's it. I like it. All right. I appreciate it. As an investigator and a journalist, what do you do as is it like I see on TV, the guy and they go in and investigate?
Similar.
Well, I'd say crimes, right? But it doesn't have to be crimes, but that's what my wife watches ID. So
there you go.
So that's all we see. But what do you do as an investigator? And I know what a journalist is.
There you go. So as an investigator, mostly I'm an independent insurance adjuster and liability claims investigator. But I'm also, now that I have 3 years experience, I'm about to get my private investigator license here in New York. But what I investigate is insurance fraud, more or less. People, or it can turn out to be fraud. There's a lot of workers' comp fraud that goes down. So I'll spend a day at a huge construction site down in Manhattan. They're building a new skyscraper, and I get to go in there. It's kind of cool. So I'll go into different job sites in New York City and investigate whether or not these people are actually for real. But anything from a slip and fall. I mean, people can trip and fall on the sidewalk. So a lot of it entails going to the scene, taking photographs, interviewing witnesses, and taking their statements. But digging, it's a lot of fun, to be honest. Like, I like digging. I see the surface of what they're trying to say, and I need to dig into different areas to see what's true, what's not.
Yeah. Do you do you like doing that?
It's fun. It's definitely something different. When I moved here 3 years ago to do that, I had never done it before, and it took me about 6 months to learn on the job. And then after that, I just hit the ground running. And I do. I like it. Gets me out. Like,
that is nice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's like my wife lived in Brooklyn for 15 years before we met. And we've been here for 3 years, and I've seen more of this city than she has in the, because I'm like all over going. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun to see the city and stuff.
It is good to get out. I try to go out because I do photography.
Nice.
Occasionally, you know what I mean? I used to do it a lot more, but I do it occasionally now, and I love going out into different places in California because it's so beautiful. You know, New York has its appeal, has its charm as well, to get out and just see it and be a part of it. And a matter of fact, I did go and I did see the Statue of Liberty. So thankfully I got that off the bucket list before it leaves, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Hey, but as an investigator and a journalist, like, your work requires critical thinking and analysis. So how do you apply the principles of deliberate decision-making in your profession? Because, I look at it when you go in, I think investigator, I always think they portray a certain way on TV, right? You told me your field, where they're super analytical and they look at it. But I gotta believe that you already have some sort of decision or some sort of, this is what happened in your mind. Like, I don't know if I'm asking a question, right? Go ahead. You tell me what you.
There are. You have to decide to keep an open mind.
There you go.
Because if I have a preconceived notion, that can give me tunnel vision and lead the investigation down a path that may or may not be correct. So you can't make up your mind beforehand. I can't make up the mind that this guy's faking it. You know what I mean? I gotta assume that what's being said is true. But I also have to assume that they're not telling me the whole thing. That's part of the job. You have to be like. So
that's why you digging, trying to get.
And there's things in journalism that they kind of blend together, but a big key phrase in journalism is trust but verify.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's like, okay, so you're saying that this happened. Well, let's make sure that happened. Let me take a look. Let me ask this guy. Let me ask this guy. Let me take. Let's see.
I know you've had situations where the story just sounds ridiculous.
Yes.
Like, this is a ridiculous lie that you're telling me, and I can't even assume that you're telling me the truth.
Right.
But then you go down and you find out, damn it, he was actually telling the truth. Right? Have you ever had
some surprising cases? Yeah, where I'm like, this is outlandish. There's no way this took place. But again, you have to verify. Like, I'm still going to ask the questions. All right, let's go down this road. And then you get there. Yeah, that has happened. That has definitely happened. Which is what keeps. That's
what makes it fun.
Yeah, but it also, like, makes you realize, hey, I really do need to come with this with an open mind. Like, because I totally thought this was BS. And yet, as we're getting into it, I'm like, that's really, So you have to, it reminds you, to like, okay, let's not have any preconceived notions. Which bleeds into what I'm like to talk about.
Yeah. So, and in your, and we'll get into a little bit. I have a question for you, but we're going to, talk about public speaking. But in your public speaking, you emphasize collaboration over confrontation. And how can making intentional decisions help people approach conflicts with more curiosity and understanding?
That's the thing. You have to decide to approach this other person with willingness, respect, and curiosity. Those are three major factors. You have to decide to seek understanding versus agreement. If I'm going into a conversation with you in which my decision is to try to get you to agree with me, that shapes the whole conversation and cuts off a lot of choices. That cuts off a lot of avenues that we could go down. Whereas if I decide to approach our conversation in which I'm going to try to understand him, that does not mean I have to agree with you.
Right.
It just means I'm going to try to understand you. And in that, in my opinion, when you seek understanding versus agreement to start off, once you've reached some level of understanding, agreements are going to naturally bubble up out of that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I tell you what, that's a great lesson, because I look at so many things where division keeps us divided. And I know that sounds silly, but you look at different types of religions. Now, if you look at it from the normal religious person, no matter what religion it is, they're good people. They're fine. You go too far left, you go too far right. You start trying to make people convert to your religion, and this is the only way, right? Then that's where we run into problems. Same with our, what do you call it? Our thing about Democrats and Republicans.
Political system.
Our political system. You have to be this, so you have to be that.
Yeah, and my side's right, and your side's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. No matter what.
Exactly.
No matter what.
They said there was
the
conjugation of enemifying is what it's called, enemifying or othering, and the conjugation is,
wow.
I think differently, you are wrong, and he is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of goes
that's
that
where
way.
It's at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's where we're at. Where my side's right, no matter what, and your side's wrong, no matter what. And there's no trying to understand either side, or why are you there? Why is that the position you're taking? So
right. Yeah. All right. So did you want to talk? What do you think on that? Like, what would you get up and say if you were in front of people? And I know you've been up in front of people before, and you want to talk about the division, the divisiveness, where we're going. And I'm being real specific, like where we're going as a country right now. Like, what are some of the key points that you try to put out there? You named a few just a bit ago.
Yeah, the willingness, respect, and curiosity. We have a serious lack of that, in my opinion. People are unwilling to talk to the other side. They're not curious about what they say at all, and they're being very disrespectful. I find that on both sides. I'm speaking about both sides right now.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
There's also, in my opinion, a lack of intellectual humility. That is, being able to admit that you don't have all the answers. Being able to admit that I'm not always right about everything. And to me, there's an amount of certainty that's unacceptable, in my opinion. Like, you cannot be certain. Certainty is a feeling, much like love or anger. It's not attached to any logical thing. It is a feeling. I am certain, until I was 10 years old, I was certain that a fat man in a red suit brought me presents every year. Certain, man, felt it, knew it, but that's not reality. So to be certain is not the best position, in my opinion. And that's where curiosity kind of it cuts down curiosity. I'm certain, and a lot of people of faith are very certain about their beliefs. Well, in my opinion, certainty is the opposite of faith. If you're certain, it requires zero faith. They're not. It's not the same.
It's a good point. That's a great point.
But being wrong, the ability to admit that you're wrong and being wrong. There's Catherine Schultz did a great TED Talk about being wrong. She wrote a great book about being wrong, and in it, she's the phrase that she said that I love the most was, until you know, being wrong feels exactly like being right.
Ain't that something?
So you can be wrong and be completely convinced and certain that you are correct, and you'll never know. But not being able to admit that you're wrong and not having that intellectual humility can lead to disaster. You can drive yourself right off a cliff completely thinking you're heading in the right direction. And learning from our mistakes is where I'm at. I only exist in a world where redemption is possible. Like as a recovering alcoholic, the ability to learn from my mistakes is why I'm alive, literally. And it's why I'm able to flourish right now with my family and my business. It's because I was able not only to be wrong, I was able to learn from it. But me being wrong and wanting to learn from it was also accepted by those around me. That's what redemption comes from. It's being allowed to be wrong and being allowed to admit it and being allowed to work towards the right. Without that, without forgiveness and acceptance and these types of things, we couldn't move forward. You can't move forward from being wrong. And let me tell you something. There's a lot of people on both sides that are wrong, and they need to be able to admit it. But we need to create an environment in which redemption is possible. Now, these days, if you're wrong, you're out. You know
You're
what I mean?
out.
There's no coming back from it. You made one mistake,
Yeah,
get him out of here. We have to allow for people to be able to be wrong.
I like it. All right. Many people feel paralyzed when making big decisions. I know sometimes I look at it and like, ugh, what do I do? What do I do? So from your perspective, from your walking in this path, what strategies do you recommend for overcoming fear and taking action?
Overcoming fear and taking action.
Yeah.
You have to, I keep saying the word decide. You have to decide, is this where I
No,
want
that's the theme, you
Yeah,
know?
is this where I want to be? Am I
Yeah.
happy? And if
Yeah.
you are, then I guess you don't need to make any different decisions. But if you truly are not, if you can be honest with yourself, if you can be able to admit that, hey, I've made some wrong decisions, I've made some wrong choices, I'm on the wrong path. Once you've decided that's what helps you overcome that fear to try something else, to do a different path, in my opinion. But it ultimately has to come up with a certain amount of dissatisfaction, just a certain amount of uncomfortability, where then you're like, I got to change what's happening, like, so that will eventually get you over the fear. But sometimes that fear is awesome. Sometimes doing something so new and so life-changing, moving from the middle of nowhere, Tennessee to New York City, I had that fear the whole time. Yeah. But I didn't let it stop me. You can either anchor down with that fear and stay exactly where you are, or you can, let it lead you somewhere else. I kind of like being a little uncomfortable, a little fearful. It's new, it's exciting, I don't like being stagnant.
Yeah. I tell you what, I'm listening to you, and you say, "Hey, do I like where I'm at or whatever?" Right? As long as you can avoid that question and avoid answering that question, then you can avoid all the other questions that you're going to have to answer after that. You feel me? Like you had to move to a different place. You had to change some things, because even though things are uncomfortable, they are normal, I guess, in a sense to you, or there's something that you're familiar with. I should say, not normal. You're familiar with it. So it's easier to stay with the familiar than it is to challenge yourself and go to the new. So understanding, okay, I just asked myself, and I do believe that I am meant to do something else, or this is not the right path. What is something that you believe, or something that you had to experience that really got you over that next question? Okay, well, what do I do then?
Sometimes it's as simple as just the next step. It's not trying to get to the top of the staircase in one step. Just take the next available step in that direction. So when I decided that I didn't want to be in the restaurant business anymore, no clue what I was going to do. I've been working in the restaurant business since I was 16. What else is there for me? I have no idea. So, but I knew we weren't going to do this anymore. I was just like this. I can't do this with my life anymore. Went on. I just looking at stuff, and I don't even remember how it came about, but they're offering a job as a rural carrier associate, basically a mailman at the post office.
Okay.
And, but not a city, like out there in the country, the rural. Yeah. And I was like, it has great benefits. The health insurance was insane. And I was like, I need something to support my family.
That's first, yeah.
And even though, do I want to start a career with the Postal Service? No. I need something, though. I need to pay the bills, and I need another job until I can then decide what else I'm going to do. So I did that. I delivered the mail for almost 3 years. And the entire time I was delivering the mail, that I knew that this was not the end. This was not the destination. I did not quit the restaurant business to become a mailman, which there's no shame in it whatsoever. I just knew it wasn't for me. What
It wasn't you, yeah.
What it was the step out of where I was and in a different direction. Whether or not it wound up being the direction I wanted to continue on for the rest of my life, that was there for me to see. But I had removed myself from this situation, and now I'm here. And now I have different choices. And I utilized those 3 years to teach myself different things, constantly taking courses and listening to podcasts, and like the whole time I'm out there 6 hours out in the middle of nowhere. So I learned a lot. I utilized what I did, but like I said, it wasn't like I said, you don't have to get to the top of the staircase. Whenever you're trying to make a change, whenever you're trying to decide what to do, you don't have to have the end goal instantly. You don't have to know where it is. You just have to say, you know what, I'm going to take the next step in this direction and see where that leads. And if it doesn't lead where I like it, I can take another step in another direction. At least I'm there and I'm not here.
Yeah. That's great. Great. I like it. That is a great answer. He said, thank you. Hey, look, so I was in the Army, and as a retired, I appreciate you. But as a retired Army veteran, I know firsthand that transitioning from military to civilian life requires a series of important decisions. And what advice would you give to those people transitioning out, and even just transition to a different job, right, or to a different career path? What advice would you give to those struggling to navigate that shift with purpose?
Embrace the uncertainty.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like I said, being certain is a very absurd position to be. So embrace the fact that you don't know what's going to happen, but also embrace the fact that you can make it happen.
Right.
Like there's a certain amount of agency that we have and personal responsibility that we have. If you take that responsibility, then you have the ability to respond. So just like I said, embrace the uncertainty. This is new. There's a whole world that you are unaware of. It could be great. It could be devastating. Who knows? But let's go see. Let's get in there.
I know.
Like I said, I like launching. Like, let's see. My dad used to tell me, he said, sometimes you jump and the net will appear.
Sometimes. I like it. Proceed with caution, but proceed.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I like that. Proceed with caution, but proceed.
I love it. All right. I'm blasting them at you. I appreciate your insight. Go ahead. Go.
One more thing that I have.
Yeah.
I have a note tape. Another thing is, if you truly decide that you want something, and that's what you decide, you're going to hit hard times. You're going to hit struggles.
Yeah.
Nothing gets served up to you on a silver platter. It requires work and effort. But a way to keep laying those bricks every day is patience, persistence, and a keen interest in the outcome. That'll keep you going. So if you're making that leap, do it with patience, persistence, and a keen interest on the outcome.
I like it. All right, you just gave me 3 things to do to be patient, persistent, and a key. I'll look on. What was a key?
A keen interest in the outcome.
I like
that. Very interested on what the outcome is.
I don't know how you said that and I missed it, but when you just said it for the 3rd time, it really resonated. A keen interest in the outcome. That's awesome. Hey, but I'm gonna give you another set of 3s. Okay. What are 3 quick tongue twisted? What are 3 key questions someone should ask themselves before making big life decisions?
3. I think of so many more than 3. Am I happy where I'm at?
You gave it, yeah.
Am I happy where I'm at? And that leads to a whole other set of questions, but that would be one.
Right.
What would make me happy if I'm not? And
that's a hard question to answer sometimes.
It is. And it's also part what would make you happy is something you find out along the way.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did not know coming to New York City and being an investigator would make me happy, but it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you'd asked me that, I would say, I don't know. Like,
Yeah. Maybe.
especially if I'm in the restaurant pulling pork.
I-
Like, you want to be an investigator in New York City? What?
Do you smell this pork?
Yeah, right. Exactly. But so like, am I happy? What would make me happy? And how can I get there? Off the top of my head, those are some of the things. But those are hard questions. Those can be hard questions to answer. But the thing is, if you're willing to make a huge life decision, you need to ask yourself some hard questions and think about it. But that's kind of what I did when I went from the restaurant to the post office. I was like, what would make you happy? And I couldn't answer that at that point in time. But I knew that was the question I needed to find an answer to. Right. So I was like, next step, just get me out of here. Get me out of this so that I can see things with a fresh set of eyes and see what possibilities are out there. Am I happy now? No. I knew that. What would make me happy? Let's find out.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of like going from there. And if you have those questions, you don't need the answer immediately. Finding the answer is what is the journey. That's those are the steps you're taking, is to get to that answer. What will make me happy? Right now, it is, I want to get on stage and talk about adversarial collaboration, how to work with people you don't like or trust.
I tell you what, being in the military, we had to do that a lot. I mean, I had some practice in that, being deployed. And I'll tell you another thing about being deployed and going to these other countries like Iraq, Japan, just to name two of them, but Iraq specifically, you have a preconceived idea of who these people are. Because of, I'm in the military, we're going to fight a war, or whatever the case may be. This is what the news, the government, the people, whoever say that they are. So that's what they are. And you go in with this preconceived notion. And I remember a time when I was there, me and my friend was there, and he had a camera and he was taking some video with the camera. This was a while back, obviously, right? So it's not like these ones were super familiar.
Right.
But there were some workers. They were nationals, so they were Iraqi workers, and they were just mean mugging us. And so in that collaborative spirit, like, it's not really collaborative, but my friend, he took the camera and he turned it around, because it's a digital camera, and he showed them the image and the video, and their whole I'm not gonna say personality,
Demeanor.
but at least on their demeanor changed. Right, it went from adversarial, to your point, to a more of a inquisitive, curious.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Smile, like everything loosened up, and it was just a powerful moment, because they felt the same way about, well, maybe not the same way, but they felt a certain kind of way about us being in their country, destroying stuff, right? But just saying, oh, they're people too, who have different that's a powerful thing, and that never left me.
That's awesome.
When I just watched that melt off of their face, all of that anger or whatever. Now, I ain't saying they didn't put it back on when we left, but but in that moment, it was a glimmer of a connection. So yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, that was years ago, decades ago. So anyway, if James, if the listeners here could take one thing away from our conversation today, what do you hope it is? It doesn't have to be anything that we've talked about. Hopefully it is. But if it's something, one thing that they can take away, what would you hope that is?
It would be the three things I said. Just go out there in the world today with more willingness, respect, and curiosity. I think if we can all do that, then maybe we'll have more moments like you were just talking about. Where instead of mean mugging each other, we can smile at each other. We can be a little bit curious about what it is they're doing and who they are and why they are the way they are. But you have to be willing and respectful and curiosity. We have a serious lack of respect for each other these days, and it
Yeah.
hurts my soul. I just hate seeing it to where people just don't have respect for each other anymore. So
Mine too. It really does. It takes me back to when I was a kid and I had the harsh realization that everybody's not going to like me. I remember growing up and it hurt my heart that someone didn't like me or we weren't able to make that connection as a friend. I'm tiny, and it took me to about 10, 11, 12 to be like, you know what? I'm just going to have to disconnect and let that go. Everyone's not going to like me, right? But it doesn't mean that I don't respect them as people. Right. It's just, we're just not connected. We're not vibing at this point right now.
Right.
So anywho, just wanted to share that a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you like to share and take as much time, if I missed a message?
No, I think we've covered a lot of things. I really like how we've been able to draw that distinction between decision and choices. I find that to be very helpful. And yeah, just hey guys, we're all here together. We all have to deal with this together. Let's willingness, respect, and curiosity. That it sounds so simple, but that is enough to melt that posture, that defense. That's enough to melt it enough to let people in, and we can all have a livable level of decency. That's what.
Yeah.
let's try some of that.
That's what I walk down I'll just say I'm a Democrat. I'll keep it 100.
I'm with it.
When I walk down the street, because where I live at, I'm in California, and we're both here. There's Republican. I see the Trump 2024 flags and stuff, and all I ask is for just be pleasant. We can walk by and just say, hey, good morning, and that can be it.
That's it.
We don't have to be great friends, but can we just respect that we're all here together?
100%.
And for the people who are like that, I'm super happy. And for the other ones, I say a prayer every morning, like kind of loosen their hearts. And then I have to say that prayer for me too, because I am sure that there is something that I am certain of.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. And lastly on that, the place that I work at right now, they have these 10 principles. And one of those principles is amazing because it's all about being able to communicate effectively. But one of it is to approach a conversation curious rather than judgmental. And it makes for a better conversation. Always jump to the answer, you know what I mean? And start an argument. You're like, well, why did you choose to do it that way? Let me get some insight. You know what I mean? So those are great messages. What are those three again?
Don't underestimate curiosity. Do not underestimate the power of curiosity. It can really melt all that.
What were those three things to remember again?
Willingness, respect, and curiosity. That's what we have. You have to be willing to want to know what the other person's at. If you have no willingness, then you're just over here. And that's where I'm at. But a thing I like to say at the beginning of my talks, especially when it's about adversarial collaboration, where people who disagree agree to come together to find a common outcome. That is all adversarial collaboration is. What I like to say is, raise your hand if you believe the phrase, united we stand, divided we fall. And that's when you get them on there. And that's when you're like, okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to point all of our thoughts, beliefs, our decisions, everything. We're going to point that at united we stand and divided we fall, rather than pointing all of my beliefs and assumptions and things like that at each other. Stop pointing them at each other, and more like point it at united we stand, divided we fall. Does it reflect that?
Yeah.
Or does it destroy that?
Yeah.
And if it's something that you believe, then work towards that rather than destroying it.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Whew, you make me think of a lot of things. I'm going to shut my mouth, though, and I'm going to ask you, where can the listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
You can find me on LinkedIn, but I also have a site, MrJamesMarlin.com. You can get on there.
I like that.
I'm also the Professional Speakers Bureau International. I have a profile on their site as well if you want me to come talk to your team. I've got a certification through the National Conflict Resolution Center to be able to lead workshops. So
I love it. I love it. Man, I love it. Okay. Hey James, thanks so much. I'm super happy for your anniversary that's coming up in April on that decision. That was a decision, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Well, it wasn't a decision or a choice because you decided you didn't want to do it, but then you made the choice to go to rehab.
That was the choice that's backed up the decision.
Yeah, there it is. So
And I still
anyway,
make a choice every day not to drink.
There it
That
is,
choice,
my man.
choices have to be made every day to back up a decision that was made a long time ago.
I looked up, I don't know how true this is, but I looked up on Google. I didn't do the AI search. I was like, how many decisions do we make a day? And it was like 36,000 choices or decisions. You know, I'm using it interchangeably now,
Right.
But that you make a day.
Yeah, right.
You know, as trivial as brush your teeth, put on your socks, you know, eat some breakfast or not eat breakfast.
Right.
That is a lot of choices.
It's insane,
so you got a lot of opportunities to be right, and you got equally amount to be wrong.
You got
So
a lot of
choose wisely.
To be right. I like that. I like it.
All right, but today's conversation with you, James Marlin, reminded us that the differences between choices and decisions can define the path of our lives. Excuse me. And your journey from addiction to recovery and from small town life to investigative journalism proves that deliberative actions, not just passive choices, leads to transformation. And James, thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.
I was supposed to so I'm reading the teleprompter. I like to keep everything 100, keep it a buck. I was supposed to put a return in here, and that's why that's why I stopped and said thank you. All right, but anyway, if if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Hindsight the Podcast and follow us on YouTube and your favorite streaming platforms. Until next time, keep making intentional decisions that will move you forward. I'll talk to you soon. I dropped my little thing. Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button. No, not right there. Over to the right. No, down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.